I'm a bit overwhelmed. This is an excellent turnout. So I want to thank you all for coming here today. And I particularly want to thank the organizers for inviting us here today to share with you our experiences and our vision for Guyana. I've been asked to speak on oil and gas development in Guyana, and not from a technical point of view, but from the perspective of Guyana as a preferred investment destination. I'm sure you're all aware that Guyana is a small country on the northeastern coast of South America, with a small population and a whole lot of oil. And that until the discovery of that oil in 2015, we were arguably one of the most ignored countries in the world. Guyana is now receiving more attention than ever before, especially from businesses interested in what is taking place on Guyana's offshore petroleum blocks. And I believe that this is a good thing for Guyana. So first, I want to fill in a few blanks about our country, and then get back to why the discovery of oil should be good for Guyana, and how all this oil can become a good thing for Guyana, and of course, the role of the investor in making this happen. So we call ourselves Guyanese. You're Americans, we are Guyanese. We're the only English-speaking country in South America, and we share a culture with the Anglo-Caribbean or Commonwealth Caribbean islands of the West Indies. But we like to think with an additional flavor as a result of our mix of indigenous, African, East Indian, Chinese, and Portuguese populations. Politics in Guyana has been dominated for over half a century by two main political parties, supported by the two largest ethnicities respectively, African and East Indian. And this, coupled with our system of winner-takes-all governance, has resulted in some amount of ethnic insecurity, where the ethnic group associated with the party that is not in government feels that it's being neglected or marginalized by the party that is in government. So we live with this constant anxiety. And I'd like to think that this is improving with each successive election, because our indigenous and mixed-race populations are growing as a percentage of the whole. And this now makes it imperative for any political party seeking election to appeal to more than a single ethnic group. Free and fair elections are held in Guyana every 5 years, or earlier if certain constitutional triggers are activated. The last election in 2015 was an early election, and it looks likely that we will be going into another early election sometime this year. The current government, of which I am a part, is a multi-party coalition government. We are committed to the social, economic, political, and institutional development of our country through good governance and the sustainable and responsible management of our vast natural resources. On the economic side, Guyana has always been a commodities exporter, and we still rely on exports of gold, bauxite, rice, sugar, and seafood for the bulk of our export earnings. Our bureaucracy is a work in progress, and our government has embarked on an ambitious program of digitization and automation as a means of drastically reducing inefficiencies in its various processes and creating a more friendly business environment. So it is against this concise but unvarnished backdrop that I'd like to say a little about Guyana's future as an oil and gas producer and as a preferred destination for investment. As a government, we see the recent discoveries of oil as a means of transforming our economy and fast-tracking development. So we have an expectation of a more productive and better compensated workforce, an accelerated rollout of our infrastructure development for the transportation, energy, and telecommunication sectors, and the more effective delivery of government services, especially in the areas of education and youth development. We see oil exploration and production as activities that are best conducted in the spirit of a long-term partnership between the country and the contractor. We see the government as a facilitator of such a partnership through a well-regulated industry. While we recognize that there is a lot that our country can gain from this sudden exposure to international oil companies, we recognize also that there is a lot that we can lose if we do not manage this sector responsibly. Our world is rife with examples of bad deals and bad experiences in countries where international oil companies have invested and extracted heavily and somehow not given back enough to change people's lives for the better. As an oil producer, Guyana has arrived on the scene quite late and with an obvious lack of experience in doing business in the big league. While this may be a disadvantage, we are also fortunate to be starting out at a time when there's a wealth of information available on every aspect of the oil and gas sector and its impact on various economies at different stages of their development. So we have had a chance to see some of the mistakes that other countries have made after discovering oil, and also to see some of the negative consequences of rapid economic growth from the production of oil in countries that may not have made any major mistakes other than to have failed to anticipate the magnitude of the impact of oil production on their economies. Our government's position from day one has been that Guyana should follow a green development pathway, strengthen its agricultural, agro-processing, mining, and forestry industries, and develop its tourism and services sectors. These are the priority economic sectors in which we are seeking investments, and we are promoting the comparative advantage that our country offers in each of these areas. I specifically did not mention the oil and gas sector as a priority sector, not because it's not important, but because this sector has already generated tons of interest. And the truth is, we don't have to promote it because it promotes itself. However, what we are saying to the oil and gas sector is that we want to partner with reputable international companies. And we want an arrangement that benefits our country in the short term, in the medium term, and in the long term. There has been a recent buzz about local content in Guyana, and we now know that Guyanese people feel strongly about local content and expect to be the main beneficiaries of our country's valuable natural resources, which rightfully belong to them. Our government has to manage these expectations and manage this new sector in a way that brings about a win-win partnership between the investors and the people of our country. We know that this is possible. We also know that it is difficult to achieve without the right partners and without good governance at our end. Our government is in the process of finalizing its local content policy for the sector, and we are looking at three key areas: employment and workforce development, supplier opportunities and business development, and the transfer of knowledge and technology. We believe that there is mutual interest in these three areas between international oil companies and our government. Why would any company not want to employ local workers and source supplies from local companies once there's existing capacity? And why would any company not want to contribute to building local capacity where it doesn't exist when this can serve its needs? And why would any company in this day and age want to operate for 3 decades or more in a foreign country and not leave behind a legacy that it can be proud of? And of course, why would any government not want to ensure that its depleting natural wealth is replaced with sustainable human capital and a globally competitive economy? These are rhetorical questions, but I am suggesting here that given the small size of our population, 750,000 people, and the scale of the discovery so far, that this has all the ingredients of a success story for both our country and the industry. Guyana has the second highest percentage of forest cover of any country in the world. This has a value. We have managed over the last few decades to maintain a very low rate of deforestation while still being able to sustain a logging industry. We have an abundance of fresh water and 200-odd scattered indigenous communities whose residents are interested in developing the tourism potential that exists in their unspoiled natural habitats. Private expertise and resources are required to develop, market, and manage community-owned and led nature-based tourism products in these areas. And it is easier to sell a destination to private investors if that destination is already familiar for the right reasons. And the same holds true for investments in our mining, agriculture, and forestry sectors. We want Guyana to be seen as a clean, green, sustainable, and secure investment destination. And that image is going to depend heavily on the tone that we set in the early days as an oil producer. So when we speak of Guyana becoming a preferred investment destination, we are speaking of a destination that delivers profits to investors in the context of a sustainable partnership with our country. We are not seeking to become the new Singapore or the new Norway. We want a new Guyana, a better Guyana, a Guyana that is relevant to the Guyanese people, and a Guyana in which young Guyanese can see a bright future that they want to be part of. Guyana has not produced a drop of oil as yet, but I'm encouraged by a lot of what I have seen happening over the last 3 years. I've seen persons being trained. I've seen businesses learning more about procurement in oil and gas. I've seen a lot more companies prioritizing health and safety and other best practices in their operations. And I've seen a number of local companies partnering with more experienced international companies in the hope of servicing and supplying the oil and gas sector in Guyana. And Guyana is a small country, as I've said before, and when things are happening, we tend to see them happening. Even though we have our fair share of naysayers and doomsayers who would like to convince the rest of us that this is all one giant scam or hoax, the vast majority of Guyanese are more hopeful today than they have ever been before. And so our country remains open for business, and we welcome all the interest, and we welcome investments. We want your business, but our people have needs, and our needs are our priorities. So we want to work with you, and we want you to work with us. I thank you for your attention.